From LPM,
Louisville Public Media.
Support comes from Vision Zero. On foot or behind the wheel, safety is a shared responsibility. And Vision Zero Louisville believes 0 roadway fatalities is the only acceptable amount. Their mission is to create safe roads by design, engineering solutions, and education. More information at visionzerolouisville.org.
Welcome to It Takes Energy, presented by Energy Transfer, where we talk all things oil and natural gas. Oil and gas drive our economy, ensure our country's security, and open pathways to brighter futures. When it comes to meeting the world's energy needs, more is better. What we mean is our world needs a wide range of energy sources to meet our increasing needs. Just wind or solar won't get us there, as the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. With our growing population and the increasing use of energy-demanding technologies like AI, reliability is key, and the reliability of natural gas is unmatched by wind and solar. That doesn't mean we all can't work together, but natural gas is vital to ensuring we meet our energy needs. Look around, and you'll see the essential role oil and gas plays in our lives. Our world needs oil and gas, and people rely on us to deliver it. To learn more, visit energytransfer.com.
Welcome to On Track. I'm Aisha Jaffer. Today we're diving into something that affects every single one of us in Louisville: how our city plans to spend its money. Louisville Mayor Craig Greenberg has unveiled a $1.2 billion budget proposal for the 2026 fiscal year, and it's now in the hands of Metro Council. Roberto Roldan is here to help us break it down and explain what's at stake, what's growing, what's not, and where your tax dollars are going. Roberto is LPM's city politics and government reporter, and he has been following this story closely. Roberto, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly is the city budget, and what role does it play in how Louisville is run?
I think the city budget, the easiest way to describe it is just as sort of a list of priorities. It's all about what the city thinks is important. It's about tackling the issues that it thinks is most important to quality of life, to the health and safety of residents. So every year, and usually at the end of April, the mayor will propose a budget. And this is kind of how the checks and balances of local government work. The mayor proposes a budget in late April. Metro Council sort of receives that budget. They have their own budget analysts and folks that help them sort of parse through it, see, what areas Metro Council members might think there's too much funding, what areas need more funding than what the mayor proposed. And they also invite all of these folks from city government, different department heads, to come sort of justify their budget if they have a budget increase. Usually towards the end of June, Metro Council will put out their own budget amendments, cuts, and increases. But by the end of June, they have to have a balanced budget, because come July 1st, that's when the budget's going to kick in.
So this year's budget proposal has increased. But before we actually get into that, I kind of want to talk about, it's so fascinating how you laid it out. It makes it very clear, but I think we have to talk about also why this really matters for everyday Louisvillians. What is the reason, and what kind of impact does it have on how the city functions and what kind of city we become? Yeah,
I mean, the thing with a budget is, like I said, it's priorities. So you say, the city is having a shortage of police officers. So you put more money towards the police department. You put more into recruiting and social media. But that inherently means that you don't have as much money for other things. And I think particularly in the last 5 years or so, there's been this real push and pull between, police officers and the police department being the largest area of any city's budget, not just Louisville. And then things like the Office of Social Services or the Office of Violence Prevention, which works on sort of non-criminal justice responses to, violence, mental health issues, homelessness. So I think it's a statement of priorities, but there's also so many issues, and it's really this really difficult balancing act because there's only a finite amount of money.
And this is an annual process, right?
Yeah, it is.
So, like I said before, this year's budget proposal has increased. How much bigger is the proposed budget compared to last year, or how vast is that?
Yeah, it's about $100 million more than it was last year. One of the biggest sources of that is a $50 million budget surplus, which doesn't necessarily mean $50 million in more revenue. The way that it works is when you go into a year, at the very beginning of a fiscal year, you have to figure out what your revenues are going to be, right? Because you got money coming in and money going out, and you have to know what's coming in. And so you make these projections, and, if you're doing it properly, they're usually pretty conservative. But at the end of the year, you might have revenues outpacing even better than what you thought. And that was sort of the issue this year. So it's not just $50 million more money or $100 million more money coming into the city, but that $50 million surplus is above and beyond what the city expected to last July.
Where does that, so is that just coming from just general like taxes, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, the largest source of funding is the payroll tax in Louisville, but we also have a lot of other taxes, small taxes on, things like property tax. That's what people really think of when they think of property, or when they think of the tax revenue that's coming into a city. But here in Louisville, that's actually not the biggest source. It's actually the payroll tax, because a lot of property tax revenue actually goes to schools.
Okay. And so because of this surplus, what areas are we seeing the biggest changes or investments in?
Police. Like I said before, LMPD is the largest sort of area of the city budget. And so we're seeing about a $30 million increase when you include $9 million for the new police headquarters within the old AT&T building, which has unfortunately run over budget. The biggest part of LMPD's budget is people. So there's $228 million for personnel, another $20 million for unscheduled overtime costs. And that is down, actually. But, this $20 million is a lot of money for unscheduled overtime. And I think that's a reflection of the fact that LMPD is down about 300 officers, according to city officials. There's also a few million more for the Office of Social Services, which deals a lot with housing and homelessness. And there's a little bit of extra money for the Office of Violence Prevention.
So what do you think are the main reasons it continues to be such a significant portion of the budget, LMPD? Is it because of a focus on public safety?
Like I said, I mean, Louisville is not unique in the police department being the largest, single area in a city budget. And I think that's just honestly, it's basically just a reflection of the fact that when we think about what city government does, we obviously think about trash collection. We think about keeping the street lights on, keeping the neighborhoods clean. But I think everybody sort of agrees that the police department, public safety, keeping people safe, people having safe and healthy neighborhoods is the most important thing that a city does.
So you talked about some of the changes proposed in LMPD's budget this year, but what are some of the reductions in the budget for them?
There was a small reduction to equipment funds. There was a small reduction to advertising, which drew questions from Metro Council because LMPD does have this officer shortage and is grappling with this reduced level of manpower. But for the most part, it was mostly increases.
So, the DOJ recently announced its backing out of the federal consent decree to reform LMPD, but Mayor Greenberg had said that the city is still moving forward with the reforms on its own. Is any of the budget set aside to support that effort, like funding for a monitoring team or any oversight?
Yeah, there is $750,000 for a third-party monitoring team, which was part of the federal consent decree. It's basically a team of people that's going to oversee the city's progress towards implementing all the reforms that it said it would as part of the federal consent decree. Now, with that being on the way out, the reforms that it's sort of imposing on itself as part of this community commitment that the mayor released. That $750,000 is half of what it was expected, half of what the DOJ says was the maximum that the city would have to pay. And I asked the mayor a couple weeks ago when he released his community commitment, what makes you think that we can get adequate monitoring and reporting for half the price? And his answer was sort of vague. He said that he thinks there's going to be more efficiencies in the city going at it alone versus the traditional process of having the feds kind of looking over your shoulder. But we'll see. They're supposed to put out an RFP soon where they'll collect information about different companies and different monitoring teams that are interested, and we'll see what they come back with.
What's an RFP? Sorry.
Yeah, it's a request for proposals. So it's kind of the way that a lot of competitive bids with city money are done. You put out a request for proposals. You say, this is what I want done. This is the work that I need done. And then you'll get a bunch of bids from different contractors.
All right. And so you did talk about housing a little bit. Housing and homelessness continue to be a major challenge in Louisville. How does this proposed budget address those issues, and are we seeing any new investments this year?
Yeah, we actually had a really good story about this
Yes.
that I did.
Yes.
But basically what we saw a couple weeks before late April when the mayor proposed his budget was we saw this unified ask, something for the first time I think maybe ever. You had 40 different organizations, and it wasn't just folks who work in, homeless services or who work in affordable housing, but you had folks like GLI, the local Chamber of Commerce. You had Metro United Way. You had all these different organizations who came together and they said, this is what we want to see out of the city in terms of investing in affordable housing creation and, providing services, getting folks from the streets into housing. What we saw in the budget that the mayor proposed was less than that. I think what these organizations wanted was about a $12 or $13 million increase in various parts of the budget that deal with housing. And what the mayor put forward was about $3 million increase.
So I guess, how are those housing groups responding to this?
I mean, I think that they're happy that there is some additional funding. Progress is sort of progress in terms of addressing this issue. It's not something, housing and homelessness is not something that the city just got into, this crisis. And so it's not something that they're going to get out of in just one budget cycle. So there's an opportunity. I mean, there's going to be a need for long-term sustained commitment from the city and from community groups. So I think they're happy with what they got. There is some additional funding to expand 24/7 shelter bed capacity, and that's through St. Vincent de Paul and the Healing Place. There's some additional funding, $600,000 for permanent supportive housing, which is housing that's sort of targeted at people that need 24/7 wraparound supports, mental and physical health care needs. And there is, I think, some additional funding as well for a modular housing model. The company that's working on that has sort of come into question recently, but there is at least an attempt to sort of look at some innovative approaches.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit, though. The budget allocates $1 million for the second phase of modular home demonstration project. But from what I understand, they haven't built anything just yet, but they're very excited about this initial phase. How does the city think the expansion to additional districts of using this idea contribute to affordable housing goals?
Well, I think modular housing, or sort of like housing that's made off-site and then transported to site, because of sort of how you're able to do the work, is somewhat cheaper. So I think the hope is perhaps, modular housing is an innovative way to not only increase rentals, but maybe to increase home ownership, stuff like that.
Can you I know you sort of just alluded to it, but just for clarity, what is a modular house?
Yeah, it's a modular home is basically a prefabricated house. We're not necessarily talking about stuff like trailer parks or something like that. We're talking about things that look like more traditional housing, at least in this specific project case, but something that is sort of built in a factory in a sense and delivered to site, as opposed to, something where you have these construction crews going to the site and it takes quite a while to sort of put everything together.
It's very innovative thought. So is the thought because it's a more affordable option that they would provide this to those in need, or is it something that's available to purchase, or what is the idea?
Honestly, I don't know exactly how they're going to do this. I think they're sort of hoping that once the first phase is done, they'll have some time to sort of knock out the details on that.
That sounds good. Thank you. We'll be back with more in a moment. You're on track with Louisville Public Media.
Welcome to It Takes Energy, presented by Energy Transfer, where we talk all things oil and natural gas. Oil and gas drive our economy, ensure our country's security, and open pathways to brighter futures. When it comes to meeting the world's energy needs, more is better. What we mean is our world needs a wide range of energy sources to meet our increasing needs. Just wind or solar won't get us there, as the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. With our growing population and the increasing use of energy-demanding technologies like AI, reliability is key, and the reliability of natural gas is unmatched by wind and solar. That doesn't mean we all can't work together, but natural gas is vital to ensuring we meet our energy needs. Look around, and you'll see the essential role oil and gas plays in our lives. Our world needs oil and gas, and people rely on us to deliver it. To learn more, visit energytransfer.com.
Now at Verizon, we're locking in low prices for 3 years guaranteed on my plan. And you can get a single line for just $45 a month when you switch and bring your phone. That's our best price ever on unlimited welcome with autopay plus taxes and fees, guaranteed for 3 years. Because at Verizon, we got you. Visit your local DC Verizon store today. $20 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G and 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate. Additional terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to On Track. I'm Aisha Jaffer, and we are checking in with LPM's city politics and government reporter Roberto Roldan on Mayor Craig Greenberg's proposed city budget. So the mayor described public safety as the foundation of this budget, and I know we talked about LMPD, but from your reporting, how is that emphasis reflected in some of the allocations in aspects we haven't discussed or underscored so far?
Yeah, I think this mayor has talked a lot about sort of addressing some of the root causes of gun violence, which is, what we've seen a real spike in since the pandemic. And so there's been, really since he took office, there has been a sustained funding source for the Office of Violence Prevention, or what was previously called OCEAN, the Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods, which, offer sort of a different approach. They're going into communities, they're offering mental health care services in communities that are the most impacted by gun violence. They have folks like gun violence interrupters, people who are going in and they're, creating relationships with people who either are likely to be the victim of gun violence or to be a perpetrator themselves, and trying to sort of interrupt that cycle, particularly when there is a shooting, trying to interrupt that cycle of retaliation that just sort of leads to more violence. I think a problem with that is that a lot of that has been funded through the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, the hundreds of millions of dollars that came into local governments, including Louisville during the pandemic. And so they're coming up on the point, those expire at the end of 2026. And so the city is coming up on the point where they're really going to have to take a look at how effective all of those different non-police responses to gun violence has been. Take a look at those programs, and they're going to have to figure out what's worth funding with tax dollars, with city money moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, is it created like a significant hole in the budget for these things? And I mean, if so, like, what have you seen them focus on more?
I don't think it's created a significant hole in the budget. I mean, you're talking about 10, 15 million, I think maybe even less than that, when it comes to some of the Office of Violence Prevention work. You compare that to what LMPD's budget is, $228 million just for personnel costs alone. It's really not that expensive. But like we talked about earlier, when you put money, even if it's $1 million, $2, $3, $5 million to one part of the budget, that inherently means there's money not going to other parts of the budget. Mm-hmm. And you have, every year during budget season, you have residents, you have community groups, nonprofits who want, funding for things like police, parks, social services, public health care. There's so many priorities, so many things that are important. Mm-hmm. So, if the city comes back and says, we think the Office of Violence Prevention's work is important, and we want to completely continue to fund everything that they were doing with these federal COVID relief dollars, that inherently means money not going elsewhere.
Right. Well, one of the things I did notice, looking at sort of development, funding is set aside for infrastructure improvements near Louisville Slugger Stadium to encourage development. What do we know so far about the intended project planning, and how does the city hope to benefit the surrounding community?
Yeah, there is a planned Louisville Sports Entertainment District that's supposed to go, I think, in one of the parking lots around Slugger Stadium, what is currently a parking lot. They want it to be rental units, hotels, shops.
Wow.
I think a new field entrance as well for Slugger Stadium. But right now, what we have is renderings, we have plans, we have ideas, and, rental units, hotels, shops, these things require sidewalks, they require street trees, they require, maybe more importantly and more expensively, different utility hookups, getting rid of or rerouting some utility wires, things like that. And so the city has talked a lot about improving the public infrastructure there, as well as for clearing the way for some developments to happen around Lynn Family Stadium, the soccer stadium.
Mm-hmm. And those are all kind of like next to the freeway there. So is this like the parking lot? Sorry, this is going to be just general. And if you know, like partially under the underpass and like away, like near the outdoor entrance of Louisville Slugger Field kind of area?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's such a fascinating area for developments, and those are so many different things. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. I also noticed that there's proposed funding for new license plate readers, CCTV cameras, and a drone program. What measures are you aware of that are being considered to balance this? I know we've talked about public safety, but the balance of public safety enhancements with residents' privacy rights.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of more of a policy and use question than it is a budget question. I mean, I know from the city's perspective, they've really been interested, particularly in license plate readers. That's something we've seen an expansion of, particularly in some suburban districts, but really all over the city. They're relatively low cost. So you've seen some Metro Council members use a small portion of funds that gets set aside during the budget every year just for their district, and it's sort of money for them to fund very district-specific needs with. You've seen some Metro Council members in recent years fund license plate readers as a way to help police officers solve crime. I think a lot of Metro Council members feel that with the manpower shortage at LMPD, having license plate readers, having CCTV cameras, having these things that help police in their investigation, because there's not necessarily a police officer in that neighborhood or in that small area doing regular patrols anymore. It's a decent way to sort of address the crime issue.
Yeah, it's something that's come up. I go to the neighborhood meetings, and a cop will always come and talk about that. So it's kind of fascinating to see it here in the budget as well.
And I think the privacy implications are obvious. I think, more people would be concerned about the CCTV part, recording your face and everything that you're doing in public versus just a license plate reader that is more so just recording traveling. But there's certainly people who are concerned about sort of the increasing surveillance of public spaces. And I think for city officials, it's just sort of a balancing act between that and wanting to solve crime, and ultimately, their hope is to reduce crime.
And another tool in the budget I noticed is AI, kind of for similar purposes to help the city kind of operate. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know too much about it. So what we've heard from the mayor's office is that they are interested in partnering with some very innovative companies on the edge of this, AI revolution that's apparently happening. And they want to do it to sort of increase efficiencies. I've heard them talk about it for permitting, which has been a big thing. The city has this affordable housing crisis. They want to be able to move more projects sort of through the system and get people building. And that's been a real problem for the city, the slowdown, the sort of red tape, quote unquote. So I know that they've talked about it for use there, and they've talked about it in use for responding to public records requests. Many of them, some coming from residents, but many of them coming from reporters. There's a lot of regulations. There's a lot of state laws around that. And so, Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit skeptical, but I think when you say AI, especially nowadays, a lot of people are starting to think about the hallucinations we've seen. Google AI telling people to put glue on pizza, all of these things. So I'm not sure how it's going to go, but I think from the mayor's perspective, as a former CEO and businessman, he wants to see if city government can kind of be on the cutting edge. So we'll see how it turns out.
Couple innovative things in this budget so far. Now, another thing I know, this city loves their libraries, and the library does have a line item in this budget, right?
Yeah, it's a matching grant, so it's not exactly what folks had been asking for. They wanted a significant amount of money to go towards the purchase of library books, whether those are new or used. You've seen a lot of people complain about the long wait lists for checking specific books out from the library. So what the mayor has proposed is, I believe, $1 million in a matching grant for new public library books. And I think the Friends of the Library organization is going to be asked to go out into the community, fundraise the other $1 million, and then you sort of end up through the matching grant process with $2 million for that.
So, Roberto, is there anything that surprised you in this year's budget proposal or other standout line items you think the public should be aware of?
I mean, I think the public should be aware of all of it. I mean, the budget is it's sort of very opaque. Even for me, this is probably the 6th or 7th year that I've been covering local government, both here in Louisville and in Richmond, Virginia, as they go through the budgeting process. And even for me, there are things that still confuse me. Every year, sometimes they sort of add more transparency. Sometimes it's even harder to find specific line items for specific projects. But I think for me, people should be aware of all of it. They should be able to sort of easily look at whether it's a police department budget and figure out what their funding is going to there, whether they're looking at public works and figuring out how much road funding there is or what specific road projects they might fund. I think people should be able to look at all of it without having to tune into hours and hours of meetings like I do. But I hope that we're sort of moving in that direction. I know in District 6, Councilman J.P. Winninger, who just got elected, he has been working on sort of a collaborative budget process with the folks in his district, getting people to show up, helping to sort of explain to them what's in the budget and areas that getting people's priorities for what should be going into the budget. And so that's, I think, a really interesting approach, and it'll be interesting to see how many folks get engaged with this process through that.
So what's next for the budget process? Where do things go from here?
So Metro Council, towards the end of June, typically will propose their own budget amendments. They usually do it as sort of like one document, one unified budget amendment that will sort of outline, here are the things that we want to increase funding for. In order to do that, here are the areas where we want to decrease funding. They also have an opportunity as well to go back and say, we think maybe the mayor's projections in revenue through this tax stream or whatever might be too low. It might be too conservative. We think in reality, when we get to the end of the year, it's probably going to be $2 million higher in revenue from that. So that gives us $2 million to sort of play around with to an extent. So essentially, they're going to come out with their own budget amendments. They'll debate them amongst themselves. We'll see. Sometimes there's an opportunity for things to turn into a bit of a free-for-all with people wanting to fund their own sort of pet projects. We'll see if that happens, but they've got to figure it out by the end of the month, by the end of June.
So what opportunities are still available for residents to share their feedback on the budget before it's finalized?
Yeah, there was a public comment meeting in the past. There's been an online form. At this point, I mean, I think the best thing to do is to go on Metro Council's website. You can go through districts 1 through 26, select the district you're in and your Metro Council member, and you can send an email directly to them. You can send an email to their legislative assistant and just let them know. You don't have to know the budget. You don't have to know how much money is going where. Let them know what your priorities are and what they should be spending money on.
And remind me real quick, when does this budget come into effect?
It'll come into effect on July 1st. That's the fiscal year.
Roberto, thank you so much for being here on Track.
Yeah, no problem.
Roberto Roldan is Louisville Public Media's city politics and government reporter. He covers public policy, community issues, and accountability in local government, and he's been following this budget story closely. On Track is a production of Louisville Public Media. The On Track production team includes Michelle Tyree Johnson, Alex Biscardi, and Laura Ellis. Our music is by Kojin Tashiro. If you're just tuning in and you want to hear the full show, you can find it now at LouisvilleOnTrack.org or in your favorite podcast app. And let's continue the conversation. Is there something you want to hear about? Something that matters to your Kentuckiana experience? Let us know by sending us a text or giving us a call at 502-814-TALK or send an email to ontrack@lpm.org. I'm Aisha Jaffer, and remember, being kind is free. That's the start of community. Until next time, you're on Track with Louisville Public Media.
Welcome to It Takes Energy, presented by Energy Transfer, where we talk all things oil and natural gas. Oil and gas drive our economy, ensure our country's security, and open pathways to brighter futures. What do you know about oil and natural gas? You likely associate them with running your car or heating your home. But these two natural resources fuel so much more than that. More than 6,000 consumer products that we rely on every day are made using oil and gas. Before you even step out the door in the morning, you've already used more products made possible because of oil and gas than you realize. From the toothpaste you brush your teeth with, the soap you washed your face with, and the sheets you slept on. Not to mention your makeup, contact lenses, clothes, and shoes. Oil and gas are vital parts of all these products and so many more. Look around, and you'll see the essential role oil and gas plays in our lives. Our world needs oil and gas, and people rely on us to deliver it. To learn more, visit energytransfer.com.
The heat is here, and your AC is working overtime to keep your home cool. Did you know a dirty air filter can make your AC unit work even harder? Keep your AC running smoothly while helping improve your indoor air quality by installing a Filtrete MPR 1900 air filter. It captures 24% more particles in the air than the MERV 13 industry standard, all while letting cleaner, cooler air through. Cleaner air, reliable airflow.